Welcome, student. I am so incredibly thrilled to be your professor for this fast-paced boot camp masterclass. Now, I want you to shift your perspective right off the bat. Think of your terminal not as some clunky legacy black screen, but as a highly elegant direct communication channel with your operating system's kernel. In this explainer, we're going to break down every single exercise in Shell 00. But we aren't just hunting for raw answers here, right? We're going to act like true computer scientists. We're going to uncover the architectural why behind every single decision you make. So let's build those rock-solid foundations together. Absolutely no shortcuts allowed.
Okay, let's quickly glance at the syllabus. We've got 5 digestible modules to cover today. Core foundations and first steps, mastering permissions and metadata, keys, directories and sorting, Git tracking and patching, and finally, finding and identifying files.
All right, let's jump right into Module 1, Core Foundations and First Steps.
Now, before we write even a single line of code, we really need to pause and ask an important architectural question. The subject explicitly dictates that all our shell scripts must be designed for and executed with /bin/s. But why? Why strictly use this over the much more modern, user-friendly alternatives we all know, like Bash or ZSH?
Well, the answer boils down to one thing: absolute system portability. You see, /bin/s represents the strict POSIX standard. By explicitly writing for it, we are virtually guaranteeing that our scripts will survive and function on almost any Unix-like system ever built in history. I mean, whether you're writing code for a tiny embedded server or the navigation system on a literal spaceship, standardizing on Shell ensures your logic is completely bulletproof.
Let's tackle our very first challenge together, Exercise 00. The goal here is pretty straightforward. We need to create a file named Z that returns a capital Z followed immediately by a new line character. The actual implementation is just one elegant line, echo Z greater than Z. But why use echo? Well, the echo utility perfectly satisfies our requirement because it automatically outputs your string and tacks on that trailing new line character. There's zero manual formatting required on your end.
And I really want you to notice the crucial role of that little arrow, the greater than symbol. That is your output redirection operator. As you can see, instead of just printing the output to your terminal screen, it literally captures that byte stream and redirects it directly into a file. And the best part, if the file already exists, it completely overwrites it, meaning it leaves absolutely no messy artifacts behind.
Okay, let's step it up a notch. Module 2, Mastering Permissions and Metadata.
Look closely at the sequence in this implementation block for Exercise 01. We're creating a highly specific file structure with exact permissions, a precise size, and strict timestamps, which all eventually gets packed into a tarball. Notice how we use chmod 455 to lock in those read and execute permissions exactly. Then we invoke a Python loop, and finally, we use the touch utility with the -t flag to forge the exact timestamp to June 1st, 2342.
But hang on a second. I really want you to put your critical thinking caps on here. Look at that middle line of code again. Why on earth would we go through the trouble of invoking an entire Python 3 script just to write 40 A characters into a simple text file?
Well, as your professor, here is a massive bootcamp survival tip. It's all about automation and precision. Automated grading systems like Moulinet use incredibly rigid assertions. If you accidentally type 39 or 41 characters, you fail the exercise instantly. Using a simple Python loop completely removes the risk of that human typing error. And here's the golden rule for this one. Alter the file size first and apply your exact timestamp at the very end. If you write content to a file after setting the timestamp, your operating system will automatically update the modification time, and boom, you fail.
Now, to successfully leap into Exercise 02, you're going to need a really advanced layout of metadata. So consider this table your ultimate student cheat sheet. It clearly breaks down the exact octal conversions you need for your child commands, like using 715 for test 0 or 641 for test 3. It also reveals the highly specific linking architecture you require to build for files like test 3, test 5, and test 6. So, let's decode how you actually build those specific links. For test 5, you're going to use the ln command with absolutely no flags. This creates a hard link, which is basically a shared pointer to the exact same underlying inode as test 3. For test 6, however, you must use ln-s to create a soft symbolic link that explicitly targets test 0. And finally, when you go to forge the timestamp on that symlink, you must use touch-h. This is absolutely vital, folks. Without the -h, you'll accidentally modify the target file's timestamp instead of the link's metadata.
Moving right along, let's get into Module 3, Keys, Directories, and Sorting.
So, Exercise 03 asks you to generate a valid, secure authentication mechanism. The implementation involves 3 very strict steps. First, you'll use SSH keygen with the -B 4096 flag. Why? Because 4096 bits creates a mathematically deep space that massively resists any brute force attacks. Second, isolate your public key and rename it to IDRSA_pub. And third, and this is by far the most important step, explicitly erase the private key from your workspace.
Listen to me closely on this next point because I really cannot stress it enough. Security rule number 1 is to never, ever share your private key. The subject only requests the public token. If you mistakenly leave your private credentials just sitting there in your delivery folder, you are exposing yourself to immediate grading disqualification, not to mention massive security risks in the real world. Always, always clean up your private keys.
Next up is Exercise 04, mid-ls, where we have to format directory contents. Now, the final solution requires piping specific ls flags into a translate command to strip out extra spaces. But right now, let's just focus on the ls flags themselves. -M automatically separates your entries with commas. -P appends a trailing slash to any directory, making them instantly identifiable to the eye. And -T sorts everything by modification time, which guarantees that the newest files will always appear first.
All right, we are making great time. Module 4, Git Tracking and Patching.
Exercise 05 requires you to write a script that outputs the absolute unique identifiers for the last 5 commits. Now, you must use git log -n5 to avoid resource flooding by severely restricting the query depth. But notice the specific formatting flag required here. You have to use the uppercase %h, not the lowercase %h. Uppercase H forces the absolute full 40-character SHA-1 hash string that the subject explicitly requests. If you use the lowercase variant, it merely outputs an abbreviated format and you will definitely fail the automated tests.
Let's test your logic again for Exercise 06. This one asks us to list elements currently excluded by local gitignore rules. So if we are actively trying to parse the system output, why must we explicitly use the -- porcelain flag instead of just running standard git status? Any ideas?
Well, the answer is all about script stability. You see, standard Git commands output these verbose, human-readable descriptions that might actually change depending on what software version you're running. Porcelain mode strips all of that fluff away. It forces a perfectly stable machine logic output across literally any system update. And in this mode, ignored files are strictly prefixed with 2 exclamation marks. This is perfect for us because it allows us to cleanly pipe the output straight into grep, matching exactly what is truly excluded and nothing else.
And here we are at the finish line. Module 5, Finding and Identifying Files. Take a look at these final, incredibly elegant command string implementations for exercises 08 and 09. For the clean exercise, we're utilizing the find command with logical or conditional flags tucked inside escaped parentheses. This allows us to recursively locate temporary files matching 2 completely distinct suffix patterns cleanly in just one single pass. And for ftmagic, we're actually constructing a custom system rule to recognize files based on exact byte placement.
Let's lock in the final architectural reasons for these specific flags. In exercise 08, appending -delete directly to the find command is a brilliant move because it prevents messy piping mechanisms like xargs rm completely fulfilling the strict single command rule. For exercise 9's magic file, we use an offset of 42. This tells the compiler to seek straight to the 42nd byte location immediately. We declare the type as string to check for characters and set the value itself to 42. Which creates the exact matching signature string we need to correctly identify our custom file type.
And there you have it, student. You've done it. We've completely deconstructed the why behind every single step of Shell 00, from standardizing on the POSIX shell to manipulating highly complex file metadata. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to wrap up our session. Now that you've built these rock-solid core foundations, and you truly understand how to write logic that will survive on virtually any machine ever built, how are you going to wield this absolute portability in your real-world programming future? The terminal is yours to command now. Keep experimenting, keep breaking things, and most importantly, keep learning.